that when we're looking at this, that we look at it with a bit of realism and a bit of honesty, and we might stop some of the, trying to play both sides on this, because fundamentally what we're doing is ensuring that there's a proportionate response to what's happening right now. And that is about extending further protections for people who need it most, whose income has been affected by the pandemic and have risk of going into rent arrears, or indeed are in rent arrears, that they, through a self-declaration, that can seek the protection and get protections further to go to the 12th of July this year. Now, if we need to do further things, then I will bring in further legislation, as I've done before. And in the overall context with regard to tenancies and rents, we are working on a package of reforms that are separate to the pandemic and separate to the responses here. So the bigger picture that the last Ceann Comhairle, Deputy Connolly, refers to, that is being done, and I will be bringing it before the House later this year, because we will have to replace and look at replacing RPZs and what will, if anything, replace them. So work is ongoing in that space, but in the meantime, we need to ensure that those who need protection most get it. Could I just, again, going back to the issue of rent arrears, and again to be realistic about the issue, whilst respecting what members opposite have said and listening to them intently, there's a reality too that since 2018 we have seen about a loss of about 18,000 tenancies. Landlords, whether people like them or not, and I'm talking about individual landlords, are leaving the market. And whilst we're trying to build up our public housing stock and deliver affordable rental and affordable purchase schemes, which I hope members opposite will actually support at the time, and bringing forward the Land Development Agency, which makes sure that we're going to be building on state-owned land, putting state-owned land to productive use to deliver public and affordable housing for people. Again, that some of those critical of this bill vote against that also. So I think it has to get to a stage where we're saying, OK, well, you're against this and you're against other provisions, but what are you for? So again, when we look at it, with regard to notices of terminations issued on the grounds of rent arrears, it's about 715 notices of termination were issued, not affected, issued, and that's in the context of 300,000 tenancies that are in place, just short of 300,000 tenancies. That's 1/4% of all tenancies. 1/4% of all tenancies. Now, in those instances, there are notices of termination that are not necessarily affected. There are protections under existing legislation. These are additional protections on top. And from listening to Deputy Boyd Barrett in particular and others, one would swear that there's no protections at all for tenants, and the purpose of this bill is just to rip any protections out from under tenants. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is an addition to it. So we just ask for a fair reading of what is there. We have to act upon this urgently. I would also remind members that there was much debate and discussion last summer when we moved out of the blanket eviction ban that was brought in by the previous government into something more sustainable and effectively legal and robust provisions that were in place. And at the time, again, many members predicted a tsunami of evictions at the time, that protections would be removed. That has not been borne to pass, and that is not in any way being complacent about the issue that we have. It still made sure that we have protections in place, but there were those, and many of the members who are going to oppose this legislation too, who predicted a massive increase in evictions. It didn't happen. The protections we brought in place worked. I'm going to address one thing that a couple of members mentioned, that there's about 407 individuals have sought protection under the existing Act. Okay? And some actually are saying, well, it's only 407, so it mustn't be working. So would it be better if there were 4,007 people, where we knew that there was disputes and distress for 4,000 people as opposed to 400 people? It's a counterintuitive argument, actually, if one is to say that the fact that the protections are actually there is telling the market that people can be protected, but yet Deputy O'Brien and others are going to say, well, there's only 400 people getting protection. I'd much rather if it was 40,000 who actually had to sign a self-declaration about being in arrears and about losing their income. Because one of the reasons that hasn't happened is because of the government supports that have been put in place through the pandemic both in relation to emergency rent supplement, both in relation to EWSS, other schemes, the €11 billion plus in social welfare supports that rightly so have been put in to support our people. So you can't have it both ways. The protections are working, and all I'm seeking from the Dáil and from the Oireachtas later in the week is that we allow the most vulnerable and those affected by the pandemic to be protected further till the 12th of July. And anyone with a fair mind who's looking in on this would think that is a reasonable thing to do. If there are others who want to find reasons not to support that, that's up to them, and you know, I'll respect that too, whilst not agreeing with it.